Caesar's Legion, the raging bull of the East, a slave army built on conquest, forged in the image of the Roman Empire, and one of the very few to stand against the might of the NCR. Everyone knows of the place these two empires choose as their ultimate showdown, Hoover Dam. Years of bloody expansion by the both of them have set the point of their deciding battle on this dam. The entirety of the surrounding region, and indeed surrounding states as they were called in the America of old, wait with bated breath to see the outcome of this duel of apex predators. Yet this would not be the first time these two empires spilled blood over this hallowed ground. Years ago, Hoover Dam served as the first battleground for the Legion and the NCR, with the NCR claiming a desperate victory through nothing other than the skill of the NCR Rangers and the lethal trap they lured the Legion forces into, leaving the Legion battered but intent on the rematch that has been building for years. And the question then arises, what if Caesar's Legion won the first battle of Hoover Dam? It's the year 2277. The new California Republic has been stretching its long fingers all over the Mojave Wasteland for the past 3 years, claiming sovereignty over everything in sight to build up their presence on this new frontier, paramount of which is Hoover Dam, the tool that will not only fuel the heart of the NCR, but its expansion for generations. Only, as long as no one opposes it. And it doesn't take long for said opposition to materialize. As the sun rises like any other normal day, blazing heat down on the NCR troopers standing guard at the dam, they move around lazily, waiting for nothing to happen as it does on any other ordinary day. However, today is anything but. A report comes in from the forward lookouts, something approaching from the east. Men, hundreds if not thousands of them, marching. An army. So the day has finally come. The Legion are moving on Hoover Dam. It doesn't take long for the alert to go off as the troopers at the dam rush to their defensive positions, while reinforcements pour in from the nearby outposts. The shuffling of boots and the loading of rifles permeates the air up until the very last second, when the drums overtake it, oppressing the air with their slowly growing sound. The sights of the NCR soldiers lock on the mouth of the passage ahead. Solid mountains of rock serve as the perfect cover for an attack on the dam. There stands only a few dozen meters between where the mountains open and the dam itself. The drums grow louder and louder as the trigger fingers of the NCR soldiers begin to cramp holding still, until they are finally relieved as the first sign of movement is greeted with a hail of lead. But rather than the expected response of men screaming in pain, metal cracking echoes back at the soldiers. Just as planned. The wall of shields is working perfectly. They may only be made from old road signs, but the curved shape ensures that only accurate shots will penetrate. The legionaries push forward, confident in their defense. It doesn't take long for their weakness to be picked apart by the enemy as bullets begin to punch through the center of the shields and the men holding them. But as every bullet tears through a shield, through a legionary, as every fallen man is marched over by the rest, the distance closes between the armies. The legionaries draw closer to their victims. The real threat to the legion's advance quickly shows itself in the form of red-eyed shadows stationed on the cliffs and towers. With their snipers, they shred into the horde of legionaries, managing to graze the mal-paced legate himself before he swiftly directs his ranged units to suppress their attack, allowing the legionaries to focus fully on the enemy at their front. When the bullets of the defenders finally shred through the last row of shields, the tide they held at bay is unleashed. Now mere meters away from the closest defenders, the masses of legionaries begin to charge forward at full speed. They do not flinch, they do not blink, as the men in front of them are cut down and torn apart. They continue headstrong, showing these enemy soldiers firsthand that the steel of their blades is sharper than lead. At the daunting possibility of being overwhelmed so quickly, the defenders begin to retreat back to the next defensive line, and the gunfire wanes as the defenders exercise trigger discipline on their own retreating comrades. But as the legionaries chase them like hungry dogs, closing the distance, readying their blades to swing, the defenders let out a merciful spray of bullets as the retreating men are swallowed by the tide. Now far enough onto the dam to access the stairwell, the tide of legionaries splits apart, spilling down onto the lower levels of the dam while still maintaining its direct forward velocity. Further and further the legionaries push the line, collapsing the defenses like dominoes, chasing the smell of blood to glory, death, or both. More of the defenders rush out of the lower levels, not to reinforce, but to escape the legionaries now chasing them back up onto the surface. Stalking behind the line of battle, creeping over the mountains of corpses left in its wake, the Malpace legate looks far ahead of him to see the soldiers preparing for one last defense. But suddenly, they give up and abandon their posts, altogether rushing off into the distance. Surely they wouldn't have given up already. Things were only getting started. No matter, the task is complete, and the legate orders his forces to cease their bloodthirsty pursuit. There's no telling what could be beyond that horizon. Now the biggest domino has fallen, the Legion merely needs to focus on not overextending itself. With the Great Dam conquered, the legionaries promptly scavenge the gear from the corpses, then dispose of them and hunker down in the dam itself, unsure of whether they'll face a counterattack. But instead, the following day they are greeted by a pleasant surprise. Edward himself come to inspect the spoils of war. Joshua comes out to greet his friend, but is reminded and bruises not to speak his name. The man in front of him is the mighty Caesar, son of Mars, and he is the Malpace legate, the hand that Caesar uses to carry out his will. Caesar congratulates his legate on a successful victory, but reprimands his hesitancy to wipe out the fleeing enemy forces. At very least, the Legion now has a beachhead in the region. Caesar proceeds to once again detail his plan to conquer the glowing city off in the distance and establish his Rome. But this time, Caesar insists the legate begin to act on accomplishing this feat immediately. Despite his suggestions to rebuild the army first, Caesar hears none of it, and simply gives his legate an ultimatum: gain control of the city of Vegas before the year's end, or a new legate will. That damn city, it's blinded him. It's all he ever talks about anymore. But the legate obliges his request nonetheless. Starting out minimal, he requests as many frumentari as Caesar will allow to start influencing the local tribes to join the Legion, or at very least to attack the NCR. The legate also takes the many rifles gained in the assault and trains a number of his men in long-range combat, and posting them in defensive positions, ensuring that the NCR won't have an easy time getting close to the dam again. The first act of winning over the Mojave from the NCR will be weakening them, harassing their trade routes and crushing their morale. Once sufficiently recuperated from the assault on the dam, the legate begins sending his troops out to watch trade routes for easy targets, while the forces at the dam continue to fortify it, and at Caesar's request even begin construction of a camp on the hill east of the dam. Everything is hurrying along well. But still, the legate can't help but feel he needs to do more, especially with such a tight deadline for his position, and if he didn't know better, his life. But who can tell with Caesar anymore? He's not the man he used to be. Neither of them are. But he will follow Caesar, as he always has, whether merely from inertia or an actual interest to see the new world Caesar will create. Only time will tell. Something that is not in abundance for him currently. With the trade routes starting to suffer after only a few days, it's time to start isolating and wiping out the NCR encampments. Everything south of the dam has to be wiped out before the Legion can hope to go up against the more well-defended bases in the northwest. The legate sends out more of his troops, including ranged units, to camp along the trade routes and harass the NCR camps by any means. For 2 weeks, the legionaries employ hit-and-run tactics against the dug-in NCR, striking randomly and with little care for how much damage is caused, so long as it's enough to keep the troopers on edge. Combined with the constant blowing of ear-piercing war horns in the dead of night, the legionaries ensure that the NCR camps do not gain a second of peace, of comfortable sleep. These extra reinforcements into NCR territory further clamp down on the movement of supplies along the roads, causing the NCR to devote precious few soldiers to guard the caravans. Yet still, the legionaries are able to whittle down the number of these caravans and escorts, while taking acceptable losses themselves, and crucifying every new casualty or capture to a cross along the highways. Anything to lower the morale amongst the NCR troops. Once this has run its course, the Legion raiding parties begin moving in on the NCR camps of the area. The first few are simple enough. Working on few supplies and reinforcements, with little sleep and rest, the guards and lookouts have become sloppy, allowing the Legion forces to sneak up in the night far closer than normal and play the first hand with Molotovs and explosives, causing chaos amongst the awakening NCR soldiers. The legionaries rush in through the confusion to start purifying the camps and find little resistance in their efforts, wiping them out completely and suffering minimal casualties. This chain of small victories, however, causes overconfidence when dealing with the next set of challenges. The recruit legionaries have only tasted the NCR's claws and small swings. They don't know the power the NCR's elite rangers can put behind a strike, something the Legate has felt all too many times. When the recruits, fresh off their previous victories, try to sneak their way up to one of the many ranger stations, a bullet cracking through the air into the head of the leading legionary cuts their attempt short, and they try their luck with a direct charge. To their credit, they manage to take out a few of the rangers before being completely wiped out. The follow-up attempts in the days after yield much the same result. While definitely wearing the rangers down, it's not even close to sustainable with the losses incurred on the Legion's side. The situation is further worsened as Caesar orders a large amount of the excess forces at the dam to aid in the conquest of more tribes off in the east, leaving the Legate with a smaller number of soldiers and without the possibility of reinforcements for a good few months. But one good opportunity does appear, as Caesar gives to the Legate his most trusted of the Frumentari, Vulpes Inculta, an exemplary agent of the Legion no doubt, but the Legate can tell his respect does not extend beyond Caesar himself, and finds it difficult to assert any semblance of control over this Frumentarius. This does not detract from the Frumentarius' surprisingly clever plan, however the disrespect remains clear, furthered by the fact that he and his men have been planning this operation for some time already. Nonetheless, he allows Vulpes to go ahead with his plan, and watches carefully as the Frumentarius redirects much of the raiding parties further south, dangerously close to the major NCR base of Camp Searchlight, in an effort to weaken it in the same fashion as the other camps. Of course, it's too large a base to conquer without a significant amount of attrition, but the Frumentari do specialize in alternative tactics. After counting every day that Legion raiding parties wear down the morale and supplies of Camp Searchlight, feeling as though Vulpes Inculta is not acting with the haste of someone whose position may be on the line, the Legate waits with bated breath as the destruction of the base is carried out. Only 2 legionaries are sent into the base, but the damage they cause is equal to 100. Sneaking past the tired and hungry guards, their journey into the center of the base is accomplished with ease, and their next task couldn't be simpler. Open the seals on the canisters in the fire station. Of course, after opening only a few, the radiation emitted from the canisters ensures the legionaries will never leave, as with the entirety of the NCR force at the base. With the threat of Camp Searchlight gone and the NCR's hold over the area weakened as a result, the Legate orders his troops to set up a beachhead at the resort near the river just east of the former NCR camp. From there, the Legion easily ferries troops to and from Cottonwood Cove, enabling them to put an even tighter stranglehold on the flow of supplies to the southern NCR camps. While the NCR presence from the larger northwestern bases hampers the ability of the forces at the dam to properly cut off access on Highway 95, they are able to slow and lessen the supply stream. This, combined with the efforts from Cottonwood Cove in the south, cuts off almost all support to the NCR camps. Within weeks, if not days, they'll be out of food. Until then, the Legate focuses his attention on the land directly north of the dam. Now that the Frumentari have conned the tribals known as the Great Khans into allying with the Legion against the expansion of the NCR, the Legion can begin building up their presence in the north. With the construction of the new fort on the eastern side of the Colorado progressing along nicely, a pier and ferry is built to complement it, allowing the Legion to transport forces to set up near the Khan village of Bitter Springs. If only they could have such luck in convincing the rest of the local tribes. Too many men have already been wasted trying fruitlessly to contact the tribe inhabiting the old air base, and the Frumentari have reported that the various tribes that dwell in the city, as well as the raider gangs surrounding it, show very little interest in alliances with the Legion, but at least many support the idea of violence against the NCR. It's better than naught, although hardly ideal. Regardless, the Frumentari will do their job well, stoking the flames. A few inciting murders here or there and they'll be screaming for blood. The legionaries will also serve their masters well, provided the Legate instructs them well. As more and more of the raided and salvaged NCR equipment finds its way to the dam, the Legate spends most of the time training his legionaries on long-range tactics and combat, preparing them to engage the NCR on the same playing field. His weapon of choice may be his sidearm, but his skill with rifles is still well above anyone else in the Legion. The only hope is it's good enough to contend with the skill of the NCR soldiers. This relative calm continues on for days on end, with little to no change barring the few failed assassination attempts on the Legate. But that is simply par for the course. What is concerning is how the Rangers attempting these assassinations are able to slip past the Legion sentries. Time enough has been spent playing around. The Legate orders his men at Cottonwood Cove to prepare for assault on the first Ranger station, and come nightfall they begin moving out, splitting into multiple groups to surround the Rangers. After days of starving and exhausting their enemies, the Legionaries are able to slink much closer to the Rangers before bullets begin flying at them. But it's already too late for the NCR Rangers. Or so the Legionaries think. As the masses of Legionaries run towards the camp while throwing their explosives, it reveals the Rangers' trickery, and the ring of flammable material set around the camp ignites, preventing the Legionaries from pressing onwards or doing anything but taking cover as the few men with guns fire wildly at the Rangers. All the while, the Legate watches from the dam at this colossal failure, wondering how it could get any worse, and cursing when the radio call from Cottonwood Cove comes in. Somehow, the NCR have rallied enough forces to launch an attack on the cove. The Mojave outpost, no doubt. The Legate hastily orders a large attack force of his men to rush down river and reinforce the cove. He returns to his viewing of the engagement at the Ranger camp, seeing the Rangers use their ammo sparingly, while the Legionaries wait in cover for the fire to burn itself out, and slowly it begins to die, and the Legionaries move out into the kill zone, charging through the fire. Many fall to the gunfire and the flames, but enough don't, and they teach the Rangers in the ways of Legion brutality, speaking to them in the language of the blade, quickly snuffing out the last of the fire in the Rangers. The Legion losses number high, but the time does not allow counting of the dead. The surviving Legionaries rush off in the direction of the gunfire now erupting out at Cottonwood Cove. The Legate too moves his attention in the direction of Cottonwood Cove. The NCR are hammering down on the camp, but their numbers are hardly impressive, especially with the Legion reinforcements now arriving at the camp. Surely the NCR understands that they need vastly more men. And then it all becomes clear, as the news comes in from the scouts that the NCR is moving a massive attack force to the dam. So it was all a diversion. What to do? They'll throw everything they have left at the dam. After all, it means more to the NCR than it ever could to the Legion. There's no chance for half measures. It's all or nothing now. Coming to a decision, the Legate orders the majority of the remaining men at the dam and the fort to regroup with the forces in the north across the river, and prepare to attack the NCR's Camp Gulf, the headquarters of their troublesome Rangers. It's sooner than he would have liked, but the Legion will have to commit its forces to wipe out the NCR in the Mojave, ordering all his forward sentries and ranged units up to the cliffs in firing position. He turns on all the lights on the dam before leading the last of his remaining men down into the belly of the dam, where they wait silently, ready. The Legate rushes to radio the Frumentari agents scattered around the Mojave, and gives the go-ahead to light the fire and lead the local tribes to attack the unsuspecting NCR. He then contacts his men stationed on the cliffs above, listening as they provide constant updates on the situation, waiting for the very second where they relay that the NCR are in sight, and he switches to the northern forces, ordering them to move in with the Great Khans and attack Camp Gulf. He then puts down the radio and draws his weapons, his 45 auto in one hand and a knife in the other, following the example of his own men, slinking into the shadows to watch and wait. The Legionaries sit calmly as the sound of many feet stepping cautiously and quietly pours down from overhead, and the Legate can feel himself counting the seconds, counting down until 0, until the men on the cliffs reveal their positions with a volley of lead shooting down into the crowd of NCR troopers, and if the Legate's assessment is correct, regardless of the effectiveness of the shots, the darkness should prevent the NCR troopers from returning effective fire, and in fact opting to take cover inside the dam itself, much like his own men did the weeks prior. But unfortunately for the NCR troopers, they will once again be the prey. So when the sound of gunshots prompts hurried footsteps to draw towards the lurking Legionaries, they ready their blades to swing at the first sight of NCR heads. The millisecond the first NCR trooper steps through the door, the Legate's blade is already stuck in his neck, and used to position him as a human shield while the legate fires his 45 into the NCR troopers behind the first man. And mayhem ensues in the ranks of the NCR soldiers, unsure of whether to run from the danger above or below. Some elect to try and face the combatants within the dam, but the legionaries use the shadows in the corners to strike before the troopers can retaliate. Even when the troopers manage to gain the first shot, the legionaries quickly retreat further into the dam to maintain their defensive advantage and draw the NCR further in. If they can wipe out, or at least delay the forces attacking the dam enough, the rest of the NCR bases should fall. And the slowly dwindling legionaries at the dam do just that, striking as many cheap blows to the NCR troopers as they can, before quickly retreating further down into the depths. But eventually the NCR soldiers begin slowing down, which would be a blessing to the legionaries that have no other purpose than to slow them down as much as possible, but the Legion can't afford to let the attack force go. The legionaries take the effort to push back into the NCR's crosshairs, using the winding dark hallways to get the edge on their enemies. As both sides whittle down each other further, the NCR soldiers finally begin to retreat out of the dam, and in response, the legate rallies the last of his troops to pursue them. Eagerly they rush to swipe at the backs of the fleeing NCR. Initially, the NCR troopers maintain suppressing fire behind them as they retreat, but as the remaining legionaries converge on the few exits, they soon overpower the troopers providing cover fire and begin slashing through the NCR ranks, slowly being cut down themselves in the messy hail of bullets that shreds indiscriminately. By the time the legate makes his way topside, firing his 45 into the last of the retreating NCR, he finally holsters his weapon and looks around to see that he stands alone, surrounded by nothing but corpses. So he ascends to higher ground to find out if it was worth it, and the sight he sees is magnificent. The NCR bases, all burning to the ground. By the next morning he is met with his troops returning victorious and the last of the NCR leaving the Mojave outpost for good. As reward, he orders his troops to help the local tribes celebrate, by assimilating them into the Legion. With how few of his forces are left, he'll need everyone he can find if the citizens of New Vegas attempt to resist the last stage of the Legion's conquest of the Mojave. The Great Khans are the first to be welcomed into the Legion's graces. Though initially some fight back, the agitators are swiftly dealt with, resulting in little casualties and the rest of the Khans accepting the Legion's rule. The many raider gangs around the region are the next targets for the Legion. Although undoubtedly poor stock, most evident in their complete lack of resistance to their own conquest, the legate allows the assimilation of them, reasoning that most will be cannon fodder when the Legion begins clamping down on the region. Once these tribals are welcomed into the Legion officially, the legate allows his forces a well-deserved rest. The following week, he marches his battered, bruised, and small army on the city of Vegas. Rather than storming the gates, he elects to walk them in, show to the citizens that they already belong to the Legion. And that he does. Slowly, imposingly, he shows the citizens of the city their rulers, and some inevitably try to resist, but they are put down with minimal effort. The robots that inhabit the city are an interesting sort. They seem to be noticeably docile around the legionaries. The legate had heard rumours of some sort of pre-war ghost man controlling them. While many an outlandish story passes around the wasteland, too often they are based in truth. Regardless, if this ghost man is real, there's little he can do against the Legion now. Confident their presence is under no threat, the Legion establishes themselves in the city by taking over the NCR embassy, as one last insult to them. From here they deploy troops all across the city, bringing it firmly under the Legion's control, with the entirety of the Mojave to soon follow, or so the legate thinks. Seeing the difficulty the legionaries have in trying to expand even into the outer suburbs beyond the city, it serves as a painful reminder of the number and the quality of his army. Understanding that Caesar will most certainly chew him out for such action, he orders his forces to stay within the already established territory, to remain as such until Caesar returns with reinforcements from the east. Expecting to wait months more at the least, the legate is understandably surprised when Caesar shows himself once again in mere weeks, not only with a much larger army than before, but a titan of a man to stand at his side, a man wearing an iron mask. Although Caesar congratulates the legate on his victory, all he seems to be able to focus on is the significant number of troops that was lost in achieving said victory. Almost as if he is in need of proof of the legate's continuing usefulness, a task is given to the legate, to wipe out the super mutants that have recently arrived at Black Mountain. The caveat, however, is that the legate may only command the men that survived from the previous campaign. All of the legionaries around the Mojave are relieved from their positions by Caesar's reinforcements, and sent to follow the legate against the mutants on the mountain. Caesar wants a show of his skill? Fine. Opting for a direct approach against these hulking monsters, he leads his men in aggressively, clearly striking the beasts by surprise but hardly intimidating them. His own men are the ones frightened, as the mutants suddenly turn invisible to the eye and begin sweeping the legionaries off their feet in droves. The massive men recoil back as if to retreat, but the legate commands them authoritatively to press on, himself pushing everyone in front of him forward. With a second wind, the legionaries push back, emboldened, and after many more dead and many swings into the empty air around them, the legionaries whittle away at the perimeter guard until they are finally defeated. Rapidly, the ranks of legionaries advance up the mountain and begin bombarding the buildings with Molotovs and explosives. The rest of the mutants come rushing out in response, bloodthirsty rage in their eyes as they run through the fire, neutralizing the facade of invisibility they hold, allowing the ranged units to empty their magazines into the charging creatures, before the first rows of legionaries rush to meet blade against blade. The mutant blades may be longer and deal a heavier blow, but the legion's steel is unwavering, and it continues to cut again and again until the enemy falls. One by one, the super mutants are slain, and as the numbers dwindle, the legionaries surround and snuff out the last few remnants of this plague from the west. A legion victory. Of course it is. It wasn't about victory or not, it was a matter of performance. And once the legate returns confidently to Vegas, he is informed of the standard by which he has been measured. Caesar not only sent the legate and his men to take out the mutants on the mountain, but he sent the man in the mask, Lanius as he calls him, to deal with another camp of super mutants on another mountain. He stands there listening to Caesar praise this man Lanius for easily pushing the mutants to retreat back west while incurring minimal losses. He knows that no matter what he says, what justification he gives, Lanius's actions will be more favorable in Caesar's eyes. Caesar only uses the matter to diminish the legate's actions even further, citing that much of his troops must have not been properly trained to incur such losses, pinning it on a fault of the legate's own character, and justifying Lanius as the new instructor in the legion's war tactics, warning the legate that he is fortunate more punishment has not been accrued. So, shamefully, the legate returns to his post, having much of his dignity and duty stripped from him, and not long after is forced to watch as half of his men are slaughtered by that brute Lanius in what he considers teaching. With these newly educated legionaries, the legate begins the arduous task of making the Mojave a peaceful land. The next few months are spent wiping out the last of the monstrous creatures and rebellious settlements that remain throughout the Mojave. No matter what task the legate completes, no matter what trophy he brings back to Caesar, all he receives in return is apathy. The legate feels his very presence in the legion less and less welcomed by the day, as Caesar's seeming disapproval trickles down the ranks. It becomes painfully clear to the legate that he is in dire need of a tremendous victory to regain the respect he deserves. But as if in direct insult to him, the list of obstacles between the Legion and complete control of the region falls on Nellis Air Force Base. Little to nothing is known about the tribe that inhabits the base, other than the fact they have a considerable amount of artillery and the know-how to effectively use it to prevent anyone from nearing the base. There's no way around it. The Legion will simply have to use overwhelming force to wipe them out. Come sundown, the legate leads his troops to congregate just outside of the kill zone of the Nellis artillery. Silently, the mass of legionaries spreads out into the two pathways leading to the base. On the legate's command, the first wave begin creeping through the darkness, closing in on the base slowly. As the legate watches from atop the rocks, it appears the legionaries may actually be able to make it to the base without taking fire from the artillery. At least, until the distant booms sound off, and he watches as his troops transition into a sprint while he orders the rest of his forces to rush in behind them. The artillery shells soon come raining down on the legionaries, decimating and scattering them like ants. But the sheer number of legion soldiers is more than the artillery can handle. The shells aim for the largest groups rather than the closest to breaching the perimeter. Those are relegated to the gate guards to fend off. Yet the firing at the gate only allows the legate and the men next to him to aim their rifles at the guards illuminated by muzzle flashes. Quickly dispatching the guards, the way is paved for the legionaries to begin storming the gates. After that, it doesn't take long for the artillery to be silenced and the rest of the attack force to focus through the gates and storm the base. The tribals try to mount a scattered defense, slaying much more of the already battered legionaries before they begin storming what must be the children's dorms, where the defenders surrender when threatened with the proposition of the legion slaughtering their new hostages. A foolish endeavour. More of the children will die in training regardless. The losses may have been catastrophic, but the gains in slaves and weaponry saved the legate from scorn. Confident in the security of his position, he finally can relax for the first time in months, completely oblivious to the threat emerging across the desert. But it's not too long before it comes to light. One of the Legion's most powerful foes, a scourge back east, the Brotherhood of Steel. Establishing themselves at an old power station, it's unclear what their intentions. Regardless, they can't be allowed to continue their existence in the Legion's domain. They may be powerful, but in such small numbers it shouldn't be too difficult of a task, especially with the experiences of fighting them previously. Unfortunately, after weeks of waiting, they don't seem to receive supplies from any outside source. Whether they were able to stockpile supplies in the chaos of the last few months, or they are somehow producing their own, isolating them won't work as it did with the NCR. With little option, he rallies his troops in preparation for a full assault. The Brotherhood will no doubt see them coming. It can't be helped. Taking his place atop a cliff that yields a view over the soon-to-be battlefield, he motions for his troops to begin the charge and watches as his troops rush to their deaths. Into the firing line of the Brotherhood paladins as they lay waste into everything in front of them. Mercilessly they fire with precision accuracy at the outmatched legionaries. The flaw in the Brotherhood, however, is their over-reliance on advanced technology. The laser weapons they employ may be deadly, but they're far inferior than the NCR's rifles when it comes to taking out larger groups, wearing leather no less. The advantage they do hold is their power armor, extremely difficult to cut through, but only issued in small numbers to their most elite troops. It takes time and piles of Legion bodies, but eventually the defensive line falters. The Legionaries outnumber the amount of laser bolts flying through the air and push their way into close combat. The Brotherhood soldiers still wreak havoc in close combat thanks to their power armor, but they can't fire their weapons at the same time, allowing more Legionaries to swarm them, and as instructed, aim for the neck. As the cornered Brotherhood soldiers move back to the wall, the door behind them finally opens, not to reveal the last few poorly armoured servants of the Paladins, but a dozen more power armoured troops wielding heavy lasers and miniguns. With these new tools, they cleave through the ranks of the Legionaries like blades of grass. The Legate begins to smell the burning flesh all the way up the cliff. In desperation, he plays his trump card, and the thunder starts before the artillery begins crashing down on the building. The roof begins caving in, but shrapnel also begins raining down onto the battlefield, mincing the Legionaries but having little effect on the armoured Brotherhood soldiers. The Legate is left with no other option than to halt the barrage. Now, with the battlefield covered by smoke and the realization of his fatal mistakes, he can do nothing but watch as his men charge wave after wave into a deadly fog of war. When the smoke finally clears and the dust settles, nothing. Not a corpse, not a single gun from the Brotherhood remains. It's as though they simply vanished, leaving behind a mountain of dead Legionaries. The best thing he can do is return to Caesar and accept his punishment. Maybe he'll at least be able to keep his position if the Brotherhood retreated west. But upon returning to Caesar, he is not even treated like a man, but merely a dog, as he watches the man he stood beside for decades throw an uncaring hand in the motion of an order for crucifixion, and the hands come from behind the Legate, grabbing him, holding him down as the rage inside him yearns to tear apart the man whom he thought was his friend. but the hands chaining him are too strong, and the sight of his former friend is hastily removed from his view, replaced by that monster Lanius, and his brutish fist flying forward, turning everything black. When the legate finally awakes from his induced sleep, he feels his arms and legs bound, and when he turns his head, sees himself tied to a cross. He struggles violently with every ounce of strength to free himself. Desperately he thrashes until no strength remains, but he can't deny his fate. Not this time. What else can he do but wonder what led him up to this moment? For the first time in years, no longer does he have the drums of war thundering in his head. The silence of a quiet mind is something he's not sure he has the strength to face. It only ends in reflection, in holding a mirror to the darkest core of the self. Day after long, painful day, the scorching ray of the sun shines down angrily on him, and all he can do is gaze over the land in front of him, a land he brought under a single banner through fire and blood, and the men he led, simple tribals that were dragged into a war they couldn't understand, bred into a life of violence. He can see the children now, as that monster slaughters them, teaching them to be good soldiers. What happened to the man he used to be? The Malpace legate killed him. He is a murderer, a butcher, a sinner. Now he sits here, stripped of everything but the clothes on his back, tied to a cross, paying for every one of his sins. And a feeling he hasn't felt in years washes over him. The tears running down his dried face bring him a tiny piece of happiness, knowing that maybe there's still something left of the man he once was. Relentlessly, unforgivingly, the sun burns into his skin, boiling the evil up from his innermost being, etching the darkness on his flesh for all to see. For days on end, the sun's hatred dries his body as all strength evaporates from it. He should be dead already, but even with barely enough strength to breathe, he still holds on. Even the legionaries and slaves take notice, staring and whispering about him. Perhaps it's one last act of retribution for his actions, to be reminded of the sacrifice made for him so many centuries ago, on a cross just like this. It's never too late. Even if he can't fix what he's done, he can always repent, always find forgiveness. And soon, the blistering evil written into his skin, the memories of a sinful man, it begins to fall off his withered body. He feels the darkness shrivel off him. The Malpace legate, a slave name for a man pretending he's anything more than. The raw skin begins to reveal itself underneath, innocent and unprepared for the harshness of the world. The sun burns strong, but the cool kiss of the breeze blows stronger. Scarred and dying, he feels the most alive he's felt in decades. Maybe he can be that man again, even if just for the end. He's going to die. He can't change that now. But he'll die as a free man, not a slave. And on the final day, after what must be weeks of being tied to that cross, it starts. The rain. Such a rare sight in the desert. Could it be God weeping over the death of another of his children? Or is it something else? A sign to keep going. He opens his mouth to drink the water and feels the strength to hold on for longer, even if only for another day, even if only to stand as a symbol of defiance to Caesar for one more day. But Caesar, he has other plans. After seeing his former legate survive against all odds and now the rain that will surely sustain him for even longer, something must be done. Crowds are gathering to catch a mere glimpse of him. The people are beginning to think there's something mythical about him. But Caesar will show them his former legate is nothing but a man that can die. Before the rain has even stopped, Joshua is taken down from his cross and dragged to the site of his greatest victory, where he's to be hung over the side of the dam. Oh well, it can't be helped. He might as well enjoy the rain while he can. And as he is brought up to the edge while the rope is tied around his neck, he can't help but feel sorry for the world that has to live with the evil he helped create. Then it begins. The foot in his back, the ground disappearing beneath his feet, the whiplash of rope cutting into his neck, strangling at the last dreg of life left in his body. He looks up, ready for the end. But it does not come. Impossibly, predictably, he still lives, Hanging off the side of the dam, he hears a voice from behind him, Caesar, and the legionaries that are honing in with their blades drawn. The order to kill is thundered in Caesar's voice, but another voice thunders even louder. The sky shouts and roars at the tiny men on the dam, exploding in rage, striking the dam with lightning and severing Joshua's rope, and he sees the dam disappear quickly above him as he feels himself hit the water before everything goes black. When he awakens, it's the next morning. He finds himself washed up on the riverbed, having drifted a considerable way downstream. The river provides him ample hydration, but he hasn't eaten for weeks. But when in need, God will provide. He finds a half-eaten carrion not too far from his landing. Though hardly appetizing, after roasting on a fire, it provides needed sustenance. Now with the strength to move on, Joshua only has to figure out where. Where else can he go but home? Even if he doesn't deserve to be welcomed back after the things he's done, Caesar always kept far away from it for Joshua's sake. But now that he's no longer serving the Legion, and an escaped prisoner no less, he can't afford to leave it unprotected from the Legion's brutality. So he removes the noose around his neck, feeling it tear and rip at the raw flesh that it fused to. Throwing the last fragment of his life with the Legion on the dirt, he begins his long journey home. The desert is unforgiving in its hostility, but Joshua makes do with what little life prevails in the harshest of places. The juice of a lone cactus, the flesh of a desert iguana, the supplies from the frumentari that come looking for him, whatever it takes. The armies of the Legion could already be marching on New Canaan. He can't stop, not for a moment. He pushes his broken body forward, day after day, scrounging only the most basic of sustenance, preserving through the climate, the terrain, the legionaries that think they can stand in his way. Once again, he's carving a path of death, but this time it's in defense of something he loves. Does it make it better? It has to. Evil must not be allowed to massacre the good that is left in the world. So, he is alive, Caesar thinks to himself as word reaches Rome of his former legate, despite all odds continuing to live. This thorn in his side must be dealt with. Whispers are already beginning to stir of a hanged man that stood against the mighty son of Mars and lived. Of course he'll be heading for that puny town he calls home. Even still, put together it poses a threat. But sending his own army against it will only cement the threat as legitimate. It could even incentivize others to stand against him. The Legion could do with conquering Utah regardless. Expansion westward is off the table for another few years at least. So he sends one of his best frumentari to lead the local tribes against the new Canaanites. It's unlikely, however, he'll get there before Graham does. After 60 days and 60 nights of wandering the merciless expanse of the desert, Joshua feels the journey nearing its end. Still unsure of what he'll do once he arrives, but he continues onward nonetheless. On the final day, almost crawling forward, he sets his eyes on New Canaan in the distance. Making it to the gate before finally collapsing, he is quickly recognized, and as the crowd comes out to greet him, he musters the strength to stand, if only to accept his scolding like a man. But it does not come. He is welcomed with open arms, with the same warmth and love as the day he left. With tender care and love, his family nurtures him back to health. Yet still, when he gazes at his reflection in the mirror, the wounds may have healed, save for the imprint of the rope around his neck. But this face, it's brought too much misery to this world. Intent on leaving every painful memory behind, he sheathed his skin in bandages, showing for all to see the healing that must be done before he can truly atone. Joshua's days are spent trying to repay the debt he knows he never will, working as hard as his body will allow, strengthening defenses, farming until his hands bleed, watching, waiting for the Legion's inevitable attack. But as the days turn to months, and months turn to years, the safety and peace of a normal life lulls Joshua into a false sense of security, believing less and less with each passing day that the Legion will indeed come, blissfully unaware of the gathering force of primitives intent on seeing New Canaan in ruin. The new Canaanites eventually take notice of the growing white-leg population and their upgraded armaments. Still, they're only savages. They won't be a problem as long as New Canaan maintains their culling. And the perfect chance soon reveals itself. A large white-leg camp is spotted north of New Canaan. With the cliffs behind the camp, it will be easy for experienced hunters to wipe out. So Joshua, along with the most skilled of New Canaan's defenders, journeys out in the direction of the Whiteleg camp, ready to eliminate the threat. The hike takes until sundown, but it's better they attack under the cover of night anyway. Setting themselves up on the cliffs above the camp, the men begin throwing down the explosives to draw the inhabitants out for the kill. Yet, nothing. Not a single soul in sight. The defenders just watch confused as the camp slowly burns down. Only when Joshua looks back in the direction they came does he understand what has happened, as a glowing light stands strong in the distance, his home on fire. He doesn't even think to tell the others before he races off in the direction of New Canaan. As the hours pass, the light from the fire begins to wane, and Joshua feels his legs giving out from running. He has to accept what's already happened. All he can do is salvage what's left, so he slows his pace and prepares himself for whatever's ahead. By the time he reaches New Canaan, the sun is just beginning to rise, casting its light over a burned field of ash and the skeletons of people and buildings alike. This is his own doing. It has to be. The Whitelegs could never have done this without the Legion. He tried to leave it all behind, to forget, but he can't. He already broke the resolve of the NCR, the one power that could stand against the Legion, and he slaughtered them. He unleashed this evil upon the world. He must correct it. Caesar must be stopped, no matter the cost. Together with the rest of the men that arrive soon after him, they scour the surrounding area for any survivors of the bloodshed. It doesn't take long for a group to be found. The two groups easily agree on the idea of moving north for the moment, but one person, Daniel, disagrees, urging that they must help the other tribes escape before the Whitelegs wipe them out. As much as Joshua wants to pursue his vengeance with the Legion, he can't willfully leave them to the wolves. It was the role of New Canaan to nurture these communities. They're some of the last remaining pieces of its history, of its culture, its imprint on this world. Joshua agrees to accompany Daniel in this quest to save the local tribes, while the rest of the survivors seek a new home. The first of the tribes is simple enough. The dead horses are well enough versed in warfare thanks to the Malpais Legate. At Joshua's request, they follow him and Daniel to Zion Canyon, the home of the Sorrows tribe. Already the Whitelegs have invaded its sanctity, like an unholy plague. Daniel repeatedly insists that they all leave the canyon for good, but he's young. He doesn't understand the world like Joshua does. The type of evil the Whitelegs represent is unrelenting. If it is not extinguished, it will consume everything it can, just like his legion. Joshua begins training the Sorrows in the way of warfare, instructing them how to defend their home with unwavering militancy, a gift he only wishes he could have imparted on his own people. With cause to eliminate the threat of the Legion post-haste, Joshua unleashes his new army upon the Whitelegs, leading his soldiers to locate and exterminate the Whiteleg camps around the canyon. One after another, they easily fall to Joshua's assaults. They may be monsters, but the stink of fermentari on them is palpable. The fools. They'll learn the true meaning of warfare when they are broken by the Malpais Legate. Blood enough spilled, and soon the time comes. The Dead Horses scouts have tracked the Whitelegs' main raiding camp to Three Marys. This is it. This is where the Whitelegs die. Joshua leads all his forces to siege the camp. Armed with merely his 45, Joshua leads his army through the withering Whiteleg resistance, ploughing through whatever stands in their way. Finally, the warriors reach the camp where the last holdout of the Whitelegs remains. After butchering the first few of them, the rest just surrender. No, it won't be that easy. Joshua walks up to them, 45 still in hand. It has to be done, he tells himself. Not just for him, but for every life they have taken, for every life they will take. He aims. He shoots, watching the body fall to the ground. But something doesn't feel right. He can hear the Whitelegs desperately repeating their word for mercy, even their war chief, salt upon wounds. But what's more sobering is the cheers coming from not only the Dead Horses, but the Sorrows. Cheers for blood. As he shoots the next Whiteleg, the cheers only grow louder, as well as that feeling again. Enjoyment. The reveling in bloodshed and torment, and once again innocent tribals, his soldiers, cheering him on. It's all happening again. He drops his sidearm like hot iron and stumbles back. No, he won't let it. He can't. The memories of his own mistakes flash in his mind, but so does his forgiveness, his absolution, a hand outreached to him in his darkest moment. Do these savages not deserve the same? Knowing what to do, Joshua picks up his .45 and holsters it, before echoing back to the Whitelegs in their tongue, mercy, then extending a hand to Salt Upon Wounds and telling him to leave, seek out his master, and deliver a message that the man he hanged is coming for him with an army. Without another word, he signals for the Whitelegs to leave. He knows in his heart he's sentencing them to death, but it will be one of their own making, he tells himself. He then turns to his soldiers and tells them to return home, to avoid making the same mistake he has. This is a path he must walk alone. No more lives shall be sacrificed on his behalf. He'll return to Caesar the way he left, a lone child of God, seeking a path of redemption. It'll take everything he has, more even, but he must stop his old friend. Soon enough, the Whitelegs arrive at Rome, coming before Caesar and delivering Joshua's message. Enraging the now gravely ill man, he orders they be executed for their failure. So Graham is returning, with an army no less. What army does he think could stand against the might of the Legion? Still, he must be crushed before his movement gains any more momentum. Caesar will make sure of his death this time. To accomplish this, a large contingent of the Legion's massive army is posted at Hoover Dam, under the command of Legate Lanius himself, prepared to wipe out any force that seeks passage to Rome. But as the forward scouts fail to report in one after another, the unease amongst the men grows. They've all heard the rumours of the Hanged Man, his triumphs both as the brutal commander of the Legion forces, as well as those after his transformation. The day finally arrives when the Hanged Man comes to challenge the throne. Yet when he comes to face the Legion forces at Hoover Dam, he does so alone. No army behind him, but still walking towards the horde of legionaries unafraid. Even as the soldiers draw their blades threateningly, Joshua continues on, stopping just shy of the dam itself, where he requests the commander to face him. And as expected, that brute Lanius eventually makes his way in front of the crowd. Perfect. Condescendingly, Lanius asks what the failed legate seeks from his replacement, other than death. Joshua answers his question with an outreached hand, and a plea for Lanius to help him stop Caesar's mad ambitions. Lanius simply sneers at his proposal, and eagerly draws his sword in preparation for combat. So be it. Joshua draws his sidearm, and the two legates stare each other down, weapons ready. At the first twitch of Lanius' feet, Joshua whips his pistol up and fires without restraint as the monster charges him. The beast swings his blade and Joshua tries to dodge, but the sweep is too far-reaching and he is knocked back multiple feet. Still, Joshua stands back up and continues firing at the heart of the beast. Once more, he swings his blade with fury. Once more, Joshua fails to escape its wrath, feeling again as the ground catches him. Once more, he stands up again, only to be felled by the monster's blade again, and again, and again. Each time he rises back up with more strength than before. Joshua can see how he has worn away at the rock of a man in front of him, the holes in his armor now dripping out blood, and the swings of the blade slowing. Joshua is able to avoid them now with ease, and let the beast tire himself out, turning from stumbling off balance swings to outright crawling, until finally collapsing onto the ground, drawing heavy, strained breaths. Once again, Joshua outreaches his hand, and offers Lanius the mercy that he never received. His gesture is met with one last swing from a blade, before Lanius resigns to his fate, and in proper Legion protocol, slits his own throat rather than give in to the enemy. Joshua predicted as much, but it still was disheartening to see yet another casualty of Caesar's rule. The legionaries, now having seen their brutal commander, the strongest among them, slit his own throat when faced with the Hanged Man, begin to cower in his presence. As Joshua takes Lanius' mask for himself and walks towards the legionaries slowly, they begin to part like the Red Sea, watching him carefully, blades in shaking hands. And like the times of old, Joshua commands the men forward, whether out of fear or respect, they indeed follow him, for now. All the way to Rome they march, the rest of the Legion's forces unsure of whether he's leading or being led by the army behind him. Either way, they do not dare intervene. Passing through the heart of the city, seeing the scorch marks on the still unopened doors of the Lucky 38, the group finally make their stop at the Imperial Palace, what was formerly the Ultralux Resort. Walking up the palace stairs, Joshua notices his entourage has stopped in their tracks, not daring to go any further. As he steps into the palace, all the heads turn his way. The Praetorian guards, Caesar's closest advisors, all of them readying their weapons. Joshua merely throws the crown of the fallen monster on the ground for all to see, and calmly watches as the fear infects everyone in the room. He sees in real time the conflict of mind enter every single person, and they soon recoil back to their position, even faster than he expected. But as he walks closer to them, he begins to suspect why. A single bloody piece of advanced technology sitting on the bench. He takes it, eliciting no reaction from the men around him, and proceeds up to Caesar's room. His suspicion is confirmed when he lays eyes on Caesar, comatose in his bed. Joshua feels his pulse. It's weak. He's dying. Of course, the Legion's aversion to modern technology and intellectualism leaves little room for advanced medicine. But knowing his old friend, Joshua isn't surprised when he spots the autodoc sitting in the corner of the room. The tribals Caesar surrounded himself with could never understand such machinery. Joshua is the only one who can save him now. All the death, all the conquest, after everything he's done, an empire built on slavery, and now his life rests in the hands of the man he killed but twice over. He finds himself at a crossroads. Everything he knows, everything he believes says this man is not beneath mercy, yet still, the voice creeping in the back of his mind seeks to replay the atrocities committed under his command, his gripping, unyielding influence. Even if Joshua locks him up and throws away the key, what if some sympathize with the fallen king? What if he reasserts his corrosive influence over the land once again? What if it all happens again? What if? The choice comes down to you now. Does Joshua assassinate the Emperor, or does he allow the man to live? Skip to the time on the left to kill Caesar, or skip to the time on the right to let Caesar live. And quick save is disabled, so no backsies. The memories of Joshua's atrocities flash through his mind. The murder, the butchering, all in the name of his empire. Vivid flashes continue to gain velocity, surging through his brain until they shatter through his will. He sets his eyes on his old master for the last time. Understanding what he has already done in his heart, he surrenders his hand to the insatiable urge to fulfill his desire, and feels his fingers constrict around the handle of his sidearm. Before he can even think it, his hand is raised, the trigger is pulled, a bullet fired, a life taken. No matter where he goes, what path he takes, it always ends the same. He tried. Lord, did he try, but he couldn't he had to kill him. No more will his evil corrupt this land. Feeling a burden lift off his shoulders, but a pain in his heart grow. Joshua leaves alone the dead emperor, and cares little to notice his servant's presence as he leaves the palace, the city, and the Mojave itself. Not a single gunshot, a yell of anger to follow him, only whispers. With the death of Caesar and the legate at the hands of the hanged man, the Legion buckled under the weight of a world without their emperor. The leadership of the once mighty empire became a battleground of usurpers, all vying to fill the power vacuum with their own hand. Their uniting flame now snuffed out, they quickly devolved back into bickering, warring tribes, and the last vestiges of the empire that was faded from memory by the next generation. The Mojave, torn and carved up, came out the victor. Freed from many of the mutated creatures that inhabited it, new settlements cropped up all over the region. The city of Vegas, having braved the storm, thanks in part to its ghostly watcher, flourished from the influx of business, soon becoming a trade hub, and by extent, an even more appealing treasure, ripe for the picking of whatever empire seeks it. After the loss of New Canaan, the few survivors roamed the wastes in search of a new home. Despite the cruel and relentless nature of the wasteland and the loss of even more of their flock, the new Canaanite spirit was not broken. A new home was found, new friends were made, and New Canaan was rebuilt. The dead were honoured and the living moved on, certain of a brighter future for their people. Having cut both heads of the bull clean off, Joshua Graham left the Mojave for good, in search of his people. The knowledge that the New Canaanites not only survived, but flourished in their new home after losing so much, it brought him peace. Peace enough to settle down into a normal life, to let the world see his face again. But no matter how hard he tried to sink into obscurity, to leave well enough alone the life he led before, Joshua could not reconcile with himself, as the myth of the hanged man followed him wherever he ventured and tore at his heart. Whenever his family came under threat, he would be compelled to take up arms against his enemies, only rarely remembering the word mercy. Boundless machinations of evil pervert and twist his will until he can take it no longer. He feels his hand reaching for the sidearm, ready to enact justice, vengeance, whatever he deems it be. But as he stands there, on the edge of a fall that he knows he won't recover from, he hears the voices allay the evil. The voices both dead and living, faces of his friends, family, people he's murdered already, all repeating, pleading, again and again, no more. Joshua looks down at his hand, now raising the pistol, and at Edward, lying at death's door. He can't. Not one more sin, not one more slight. He won't let a single more page of his life be written in blood. Joshua makes his decision, putting the pistol back on his hip, and beginning the operation to save Edward's life. When he finally returns to the ground floor, he sees the room still populated with Caesar's advisors, their hands resting on their weapons. He knows if even a single match is lit, he'll never see the end of the fire. Not showing any signs of weakness, he walks confidently up to the closest one, Lucius, the leader of the Praetorian Guard. Joshua puts his hand on the man's shoulder and tells him simply, "It's over." The men all exchange nervous glances, and for a single second, Joshua wonders if he's made the wrong choice, before the men resign to their opposition and kneel before Joshua. The Empire belongs to him now. Even if his ascension was born from the fear embedded into the ranks of the Legion, that doesn't mean he can't lead them down the path of redemption. After decades of an ill-spent life, Joshua Graham finally did what he should have from the beginning. Teach the right way. He instilled in his soldiers, in every soul the Empire touched, the words of the good book, the strength to lay down their weapons, to show mercy and compassion to their fellow man. The fire of war that burned in their hearts was snuffed out by the uncompromising fire of the Father's love, focused through Joshua. It was a slow process, undoing Caesar's poison from their minds and healing their souls. But with the help of the New Canaanites and the Ghost Man of New Vegas, every corner of darkness was shined through. The slavery that built the Empire was ever so slowly strangled out as the citizens of the new Empire were given new purpose, new identity. The brutality the Legion was built upon gently washed away in the tides of time, giving rise to something new, something better. Having survived his operation, Edward Sallow was locked away from the world at the behest of the Hanged Man, so that his poison would never again be unleashed upon the world, and there he spent the rest of his days, isolated, imprisoned, saved from the routine visits from his old friend. Joshua Graham came to be known by many names throughout his life. After his ascendancy to Emperor, that didn't change. But after that moment, so rarely did he hear his own name spoken aloud, as the people of his empire could only ever see him as the Hanged Man. To ensure the future of his new empire, he vowed to never again let the world see the face of Joshua Graham, and let his memory fade into the dust as future generations would know only the legend of the Hanged Man. With their heads held high and their hearts full of hopeful civility, the NCR marched into the Mojave, their politics and their ideals unprepared for the cruelty of the wasteland. Torn down by the brutality of the Malpace legate, they retreated back home in dishonourable defeat. It remained Joshua Graham's biggest regret, and his biggest fear of what they would become, having burned the mark of Caesar deep into their heart.